Thank you very much. Two things comes to mind. Have you registered for gala dinner and have you registered for the oath? If you haven't done so, please do so. Both very important, different perspective activities of the society. So the keynote after lunch is titled Industrial Psychology Profession in Relation to Society, Opportunities and Challenges. And I immediately found an opportunity to chat to Gert about, a little bit about, outside of his bio, so that I can understand a little bit more about him. And most of you will know that Gert has been one of the pioneers and founders of SAGE, which is a very prominent journal. In fact, the only journal of industrial psychology in South Africa. And the South African Human Resource Management Journal, very important journals in our field, and I'm sure many of you have searched and found great articles in those journals. Gert has also been responsible for creating open spaces whereby professionals can obtain CPD points through AOSIS. And so we can see Gert is a very schooled or very, very sound professor in industrial psychology. He's a very experienced individual. In fact, I said to him, when I was still a bit younger, somebody asked me outside of IOP, a businessman asked me, do you know Gert Roodt? And I said, no. And he said, well, you should find out a bit more about his articles that he writes. And so I asked Gert, so Gert, if your world is then filled with so much information and knowledge and research, which is pretty boring sometimes, or mundane, or maybe challenging, many opportunities, Gert said, so I said, Gert, so what do you do for fun? And he did say, stick with me and I'll show you, but unfortunately, we only have, he didn't say that, I'm lying. But it's great to have you here, Gert, and I want to introduce you formally. We do have a short bio, which I want to read for the audience, but I know that it's not really something that you would really be concerned about. So, Gert Roodt has a D.Admin in industrial psychology. He is licensed psychologist and registered personnel practitioner. He is author, co-author of more than over 100 peer-reviewed journal articles and about 60 conference proceeding papers, 15 technical reports, and editor, co-author of 11 books. Author, co-author of 60 book chapters and several articles in non-research-based journals. He is also co-presenter of approximately 135 peer-reviewed papers at national and international academic conferences. Gert is currently the Vice Dean of Research in the Faculty of Management at UJ. He was the former head of the Center for Work Performance in the Department of Industrial Psychology and People Management. He is a former chair of the Society of Industrial Psychology from 1995 to 1997, that's IOPSA, and he is rated by the NRF as a Category 2 researcher. I don't know what a Category 2 researcher is. C2 researcher. So you will have to tell me more about that. We welcome Gert, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for this opportunity, and hello to all of you that I haven't seen for quite a long time. I noticed some people, or I saw them entering the space, so I didn't say hello to you. So good day, and I hope we get an opportunity to bump into each other again. Charlene, thank you for this introduction. I will remain quiet about what I do in my private time and what excites me. But I noticed you wear a lovely lipstick. I don't want to say I'm a lipstick tester or something like that, but I will show you afterwards what I can do. Okay, on a more, let's say, serious note, let's go over to the presentation and the aims of the presentation. I want to cover 5 aspects. And firstly, that is to unpack or explore a bit the relationship between the industrial psychology profession and the broad society or the broader society. And the second aim is to have a look at what are the categories within industrial psychology that we can also refer to as communities of practice, if you wish. And then the third aim is to have a look at what are possible stakeholders in society that we can relate with as a profession. And the fourth aim is then to have a look at some exemplary relationship opportunities between those specialist areas in industrial psychology and the broader society in general. And then lastly, I want to conclude and point out what are the opportunities and challenges in my view. I think I try to be not highfalutin or complex in my presentation, and some of you may think, wow, this is really a very simplistic approach, but that was the road that I chose in doing the presentation. Keep it simple, keep it straightforward, so that I can get the message across as wide as possible. So let's have a look at the first aim. That is basic configurations of relationships between the industrial psychology profession and the broad society. So if I look at society, then I can say within society there are possible stakeholders that the industrial psychology profession can relate to or establish working relationships with. But within the industrial psychology profession, and that's not indicated on the slide, there are also opportunities or specialist categories or communities of practice. And the idea is that we then say, what is the relationship between the industrial psychology profession and society in general, or the broad society in general? In this particular slide, it goes or works on the assumption that there is no relationship between the industrial psychology profession and the broad society, hence there is no intersection between the two circles. But I think that's not the case at the moment. I think it looks more like this, where we have some intersection between the industrial psychology profession and some stakeholder groups in broad society. So in this case, I would argue that the industrial psychology profession is just partially relevant in the broader society, and we didn't explore the full opportunities or the full potential in terms of possible stakeholders. And then in the third instance, I would like to see it like this, where the industrial psychology profession stands within the broad society and services a broad range of stakeholders within society, and then becomes relevant to the broad society in general. So that is the argument that I would like to propose. And so the challenge is, can we move from this position, which I assume is currently the status quo, to this position where we become socially more relevant and more engaged in broad societal issues? Okay, so that covers the broad aim, or the first broad aim of my presentation. The second aim is to have a look at the communities of practice within the industrial psychology profession. And that was interesting when I started asking questions around to Anne Bucket, and Anne also asked questions, or went to the Health Professions Council and said, can you help? I'm looking for this information and that information. And in the end, Llewellyn pointed us out to a survey that was conducted in 2014 amongst SAOPSA membership. And this is what the results yielded, that 62% of the sample were registered industrial psychologists, registered psychologists in the category industrial psychology, 62%, 130 psychologists, and then psychometrists in independent practice, 17%, or 35 people, and then intern psychologists busy with their internship in industrial psychology, 14%, and then a number of 29. But you note when you add up those percentages, you won't get to 100. I think it only adds up to 93. There were other smaller categories that I just ignored. They were so small that they don't actually have significant numbers in those categories. So I just stopped with these three broad categories. And then I said, let's project the numbers where it was in 2014 in terms of those categories, and project them to the total number of people that were or are registered currently with the Health Professions Council, and that's 1,755 people that are registered as industrial psychologists or in this space of the industrial psychology profession. And if we say, okay, 62% of the people in SAOPSA are registered industrial psychologists, then we should have by now 1,088 people who are registered psychologists in the category industrial psychology for 2016 in SAOPSA. When we take the full category of people registered as industrial psychologists as a target population. Psychometrists, 17%, projected, it gives us 298, and intern psychologist gives us 14%, and that is 245. And currently, the SAOPSA membership is only 794. So there is a gap, a potential gap, between 794, say close to 800, and the 1,755 who are registered with the Health Professions Council. So our membership in SAOPSA represents less than 50% of the total number of people registered in the space of industrial psychology. And one then immediately asks the question, what happened to the rest? There is more than 50% of people that don't belong to SAOPSA. And what is the story behind this? Why is this the case? There's no other competing body or association that draws people to another category or whatever. So I think that's a question that needs some scrutiny from within SAOPSA. But I will have to say something more about it. And then in my second slide, sorry, that happened, is to say the people who are members in industrial psychology or with SAOPSA, where are they registered? What kind of jobs are they doing within practice? And that is also based on a 2014 survey, membership survey, and there are no figures available on a membership basis in SAOPSA that could immediately tell me we have so many people registered as industrial psychologists, they're working here, they're doing this, they're doing that, etc. So we had to go back to the 2014 survey again. So 30% are working in organizations, 60 people. 17% are working in consulting firms as consultants, so it's 34 people. 15% have their own practice, so that is, and that's 29 people. And then 12 people in the survey were academics, sorry, and that 23 in total. And then we get to the interns. Interns in organizations, 13%, 25 people. Interns in independent practice, 2, that's 3%. Sorry. And then psychometrists in organizations, 11%, gives 21. And then psychometrists in independent practice, 3%, that gives 5 people. So that gives an indication of what are industrial psychologists doing and what are they keeping themselves busy with when they work in practice. Again, when we project those figures to the 2016 number of people that are registered with the Health Professions Council, the 1,755, then there should be 526 people working in organizations, 298 in consulting firms, and 263 in their own practice, 210 academics working at universities or in universities of technology, then internships in organizations and independent practice, you see the numbers there, and also psychometrists, you see the numbers there. So what I'm trying to say or indicate is that we have large numbers of individuals, and although these figures are projected, and I fully acknowledge there can be prediction error in the whole process because the sample sizes that participated in the survey in 2014 may misrepresentative in the different categories. But the message I want to get across is there are substantive groups of people that work in those categories, and they have different needs. They don't do the same job. An academic working at a university is not the same person who is an industrial psychologist in an organization, or who is an industrial psychologist working as a consultant for a consulting firm. They're vastly different in their approaches and the information and knowledge that they need. That is a basic assumption that I'm working on. So, So here is the question then. Who is SAOPSA speaking for? Who do they represent? If there are 1,755 people registered in the category of, or the broad category of industrial psychologists based on 2016 figures, and SAOPSA only has 794 members. So that means more than 50% of the people are not represented by SAOPSA, and that means there is an opportunity to increase membership of SAOPSA. There is a gap to fill. And when I look around, I see a large number of white faces and just a small number of other faces. And then immediately I'm asking, but why are these people not present today? Are they members? Are they not members? What is the reason for not being a member of SAOPSA? And I leave those questions with SAOPSA and with the SAOPSA management. You can ponder over it and try and find questions or answers to these questions. So, to conclude then, I would say the communities of practice that are significant in the SAOPSA membership or in the industrial psychology profession is private practitioners working from their own practice and people working as consultants in industry. Then we have academics and researchers, and then we have people that work in organizations as industrial psychologists, mostly in the function of people practitioners. And these, when I say organizations, it includes corporates, government institutions, and also state-owned enterprises. So I'm casting the net quite widely here. And then lastly, in the category of interns and psychometrists. I'm maybe insulting psychometrists by saying you're similar to interns, but just to create an idea of what the communities of practice are. And I think those people are doing quite unique things that are different from one another, and we cannot assume that they are all doing exactly the same things and then can be very practically be covered with an umbrella to say we are all industrial psychologists and we all share the same body of knowledge and there's nothing that differentiates us. And I was quite surprised that SAOPSA couldn't give me the information about where are the people working and how do they share the different groups. So the third aim, and I have to push a bit, is possible societal stakeholders. And here I have industry, government or state-owned enterprises, universities of technology, unions, organized labor, secondary schools, the industrial psychology profession itself as a profession, as a stakeholder group that the industrial psychology profession can serve. Individuals and also the South African Board for Personnel Practice. Now let me look at the fourth aim, and that is to explore some exemplary relationship opportunities between the industrial psychology profession, those communities of practice on the one hand, and then also in industry or, in broad society, what are the stakeholder groups? And I highlighted the ones in black as possible opportunities that we can explore. But I think it's just from my thinking and my point of view, and I think there may be many others, that you can start filling in the spaces and say these are stakeholder groups that we can reach and we can share our knowledge and introduce them to the industrial psychology profession and help them with the social problems that they are grappling with. The question is, how many industrial psychologists are working in organized labor and are sharing their information and expertise with unions and guiding unions in a number of aspects? So that I leave that question with you. Then we have academics as a community of practice, but the industrial psychology profession wants information or needs information that is based on research that can assist them with decisions that they make. We use measurement instruments, for instance, and since 1994, these measuring instruments are supposed to be culturally fair, supposed to be not biased. But how many research has been published on these instruments to say, is there an indication whether these instruments are biased or not? Which items are biased? Is there uniform bias? Is there non-uniform bias? We don't know, because this information doesn't get published. So I think there's opportunity for researchers to explore this and build knowledge in this area so that we have information to make sound decisions on when we use testing or assessment instruments. Then we have people practitioners. A lot of people, as you saw in the categories before, are working in the space of people practitioners, but only a small percentage of the industrial psychologists registered with the Health Professions Council are also registered with the South African Board of People Practice. Only a small percentage. I think last time I inquired it was less than 10%. So why can you say I am working in this professional space but I'm not registered in that professional category? And I think there's an opportunity there for industrial psychologists to make your voice heard in this space as industrial psychologists, and also bringing sound research and research knowledge into that space. And then for intern psychologists as a community of practice, I think there's a wonderful opportunity to share your expertise and knowledge with pupils in grade 11 and grade 12 and help them to make career choices, do your testing in schools, use it for your internship purposes, and simultaneously help younger people in South Africa that didn't have this opportunity to be exposed to psychological assessment, to help them to make career choices. I think there's a wonderful opportunity in this space, and we can make a larger contribution. So by just exploring this few examples, I'm challenging you to say, go and think about other places in broader society where you can make a difference. Add them to the list of stakeholders. Look at the specialist groups or the community of practice within the industrial psychology profession. See what are common denominators, and we can get a large enough group of people together to go out in society and make a difference there. So I leave you with that challenge. So lastly, then to the conclusion, I'm slightly over my time. The challenges, in my view, that faces the SAOPSA membership and the management structures of SAOPSA is to grow your membership from less than 50% to close to the region of 70%. Then only you can say you are representing the industrial psychologist and that you speak on behalf of the industrial psychologist. And I'm leaving that as a challenge to the SAOPSA management structures. Then also the segmentation of the membership categories. I said something about that, is that the information wasn't available, so it doesn't feature in the thinking of the SAOPSA management to say what are the categories of industrial psychologists that we are serving, what are their unique needs, and how are they different from other industrial psychologists working in different spaces. And I think that will just introduce a better service to the membership if you can segment your market in terms of membership categories. And then thirdly is to grow and promote your diversity of membership. Rather than seeing 80-90% of white faces, I challenge you to grow the membership and then in the years to come have a truly representative group of people that is reflecting the South African society or the broad society, so that we have different diversity in terms of race, age, gender, opinion, and beliefs, that we can bring that into the melting pot of new ideas and innovative ideas in the SAOPSA membership. Then I think in terms of opportunities, not that these challenges are not opportunities, I think they're also opportunities. But I think you need to explore all possible opportunities in society to be relevant, to be socially relevant. That means what other stakeholder groups are there in society that can benefit by the knowledge and expertise of industrial psychologists. For instance, universities. Universities are more and more being managed as knowledge production hubs, like if they producing research like on a production line. And all Henry Mintzberg's views and research on the professional bureaucracy are not featuring anywhere in the thinking about how we approach universities. So what do industrial psychologists do working in those institutions, and I'm counting myself in here, that are pushing the university more to become production machines? And then I challenge, or I think there's opportunity for research to be aimed at specific stakeholder groups, that you say, I am doing this research and I'm specifically aiming it at that particular stakeholder group in industry or in society or whatever you indicate, so that the research is very specific. So if we say there is a need for research for the industrial psychology profession so that it provides sound basis for decisions to be made about assessment instruments, that research then targets the industrial psychology profession specifically as a stakeholder group. And I think when we publish research articles, I think we should be more specific in terms of how we aim or address the research to be socially relevant. And then lastly, to make industrial psychology a practical and a useful tool in resolving societal challenges. South Africa is a country in transition, and we're faced with a lot of societal problems like poverty, corruption, and things like that. How can we as industrial psychologists contribute towards making a difference in those spaces and helping people functioning in these communities that are struggling with these kind of problems, how to alleviate the problems and help them to assist and to improve themselves. I think we are positioned in a space to make a difference and to help people. I am basically at the end of my career, and I have a few years left, but there are many young faces that I see around, and I think you can take it on as a challenge and make a difference as industrial psychologists and contribute to the profession and the impact of the profession. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening to me. I hope I stimulated some ideas with you, and it will give you some thought about making a difference in society. Thank you.
Especially regarding unions. You know, unions are perceived as adversarial, and therefore your relationship with them must be adversarial. And it requires fundamentally a mind shift. And we are the mind shifters. How are we going to think differently about the influence and impact we have out there? Just shifting the energies of unions. There's sufficient negative energies about so many other things in the world. Are there any questions for her? There's a question from Petrus. Dr. Nell, will you put the mic on, please?
I think I'm now wired for sound, so I think I'm giving away my age on the type of music I'm listening to. I like the idea of different stakeholder groups within the industrial psychology profession. Maybe just as an add-on, SIOPSA may do well to look at what PSYOP has been doing in terms of the competencies for the different fields of practice within industrial psychology. So they've got different competencies for IO psychologists that go into academia. They've got a different set of competencies for consultants, a different set of competencies for those working in organizations, and different set of competencies for those working in government. So I think it may be, typical lecturer, maybe a useful research project to then get these different communities of practice together to start identify possible, almost like core things that industrial psychologists should be able to do, but then have electives in terms of, well, if you want to go into government, these are some additional skills that you require. If you go into academia, these are some additional skills that you require. So that's maybe just an add-on to, well, challenge everyone in the room to say that if we want to change and become more relevant to the different stakeholders, then maybe we need to just relook at some of the things that we do well, but start thinking about what do we need to add on to our toolbox. Thanks.
Thank you. That's very good feedback. I'm sure Dion likes if some of us have taken that feedback. Dr. Nell, thank you very much. Any comments from you?
There is a question.
My question is addressed to Professor Roodt. I want to know, in his statistical analysis, did you look at the racial composition of SIOPSA members?
No, not at all. I didn't have the information. I couldn't get access to information that will give me an indication of what the membership categories are. So I made my comments based on the observations that I see in front of me.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Questions? Okay, thank you for those two responses. The next step is to ask Lou Helen, our president, to come to the front and formally thank Prof. Roodt for his contribution to the science and the practice, and after which we will disperse again to our venues for the next thing on the agenda, and then we have tea, and after tea